Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Team English Talks, back by popular demand, as in that one person asked about us and, well, we don't need any encouraging, so here we are. I'm Miss Owens and with me I've got Mr Steele.
Hello.
Mr Brough.
Hello.
And we're so excited to welcome back Miss Weston.
Hello.
How's your last 2 weeks been?
It's been a whirlwind, but I have very much enjoyed teaching Macbeth, so I'm ready to talk about it more.
Oh,
Yeah, if there's anything that's going to entice you back into it, it's teaching Macbeth and talk about Macbeth for a bit.
And one of the reasons why we've chosen the topic today is it's one of Miss Weston's favourites. So, to welcome her back and to make her feel comfortable and everything. Today's topic is going to be on Lady Macbeth. Okay, the idea is that we're going to help out with Year 11 revision. There's going to be some spoiler alerts for Year 10, but hey, we can't help that. So, okay, Mr. Steele, why should we bother dedicating a whole podcast to Lady Macbeth?
As soon as it's Season 2, and it's the first episode of Season 2, I need to say, because it's Lady Macbeth, isn't it?
Season 2.
Season 2.
It's
Season 2.
Yeah.
We're
back,
in the
we're
big
fresh.
leagues now.
We're
We're
back
fresh.
fresh and we're ready for our single listener to enjoy Season 2.
We get at least 65 on each one. We get
Is that just you listening to it 64 times?
I think my mum might have listened to it.
We reach literally tens of people every week. But no, with Lady Macbeth, I think why bother dedicating a whole podcast episode to her? Because she's the OG femme fatale. She is an absolutely amazing character, so nuanced and just, great to get to grips with and sort of delve beneath the surface. And I just think it, and it's also good to sort of maybe address some misconceptions about her. That's why it'd be good to do a whole podcast episode.
I'm just going to say, Miss Ridgeon this morning just went, oh, you're not just going to harp on about how great she is, because Miss Ridgeon really doesn't like Lady Macbeth at all.
I feel like there's going to be a little bit of clashing of ideas on parts of
I
this.
don't like Lady Macbeth either, but not because I think she was written not to be liked, but not for the obvious kind of reasons.
She's an interesting character. She's
An
not
interesting
a likable
character,
We all
yeah,
know
yeah.
the most
She's not
interesting
the good guy,
characters.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
She is
The
interesting.
most interesting characters
Yeah.
are the ones you sort of know are evil.
Yeah.
You know, any media.
That's
you have
when
that.
she's not busy scrubbing and cleaning the castle for Duncan's arrival.
Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the things we're going to talk about today.
It's like, I mean, we love like a villainess. Is that a word?
Yeah,
Well,
well,
I feel like she's perhaps a bit more nuanced than that as well,
Yeah.
than a villainess, but she's definitely got a dark side.
Cautious,
Reminds me a
yeah.
bit of like Maleficent.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Just maybe she deserves her own series or something. We can do like the backstory to Lady Macbeth.
Well, they did the whole Anne Juliet, so maybe they need to do and Lady
So
Macbeth.
there has been, quite recently, I think I saw it over the summer, there was a novel release called Lady Macbeth, but I read the reviews of it, and as soon as I read the reviews, I'm like, I'm just not going to...
Yeah, it needs to be done in the right hands.
Yeah, it wasn't in the right hands, I don't
Yeah.
believe. I'm not going to name the author because A, I don't know it, and B, I don't want to be libelled, so...
They might be one of our 65 listeners.
Yeah, they might, you never know.
In your opinion, sir.
Yeah, in my
there
opinion.
There you
that's
go,
it.
in your opinion. So, okay then. Right, let's start off then with a discussion about, who is Lady Macbeth? Why is she there? Why is she one of the characters? What role does she play in the play?
This is where we wind up Miss Weston
Yeah,
and
wind her
pass
up,
the
let her
ball
go.
to her and let her go.
So, well, Lady Macbeth really is a catalyst. She's one of the many catalysts for Macbeth's downfall. I think that it would be false to say she's the only catalyst, and I know that a lot of the time you read students writing that it's Lady Macbeth's fault that Macbeth kills Duncan, and if you read the text, it's clearly not. He already has that idea.
Yeah.
Straight after the witches, he talks about the murder yet fantastical that shakes my very something of man. I can't remember the exact quote, but murder is yet fantastical. So he's already thinking of murder. Later on, he says, "Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires." And that's before
Yeah,
he
this
talks
is all before we've even seen Lady Macbeth, isn't
before
it?
we
Yeah,
even met Macbeth, Lady Macbeth. So we know that he's thinking of murder. What she does is she gives him that final push, and she comes up with a plan. As Macbeth says, he's thinking of murder, but there's no plan. She's the one who comes up with a plan.
Can I just stop in there? We were talking to Year 10 today about what an awful plan it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
if
not
you're
the
going to
best.
kill somebody, I mean, I'm not saying you will, we're not going to. But
No
you'd-
regicide here, thank you.
You'd smother him or you'd poison him, wouldn't you? Why would you stab him? Because it immediately points guilt to somebody.
Yeah,
It just suggests, I don't know.
I never even thought about that.
Well,
I mean, especially in lots of versions where he's depicted as an old man, Like a
Yeah,
quiet
died in
little
his
poisoning. It's like, oh yeah, died in his sleep. Like,
Yeah.
I suppose then you've then got the idea of the whole point is to put suspicion on someone so they can
Yeah.
then blame Malcolm so that he can't take
Yeah.
the throne.
So the
If he died in
guards,
his sleep, then
It was always
everyone's
supposed
right.
to be the guards did it
Yeah.
with the implication that
That
Malcolm
Malcolm told them to do
organised
that,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just too obvious. Like, she's either really naive or a bit stupid. You know.
I wonder if it's just Shakespeare talking, kind of harnessing there these ideas of Macbeth as a violent man, that their mind never went to a peaceful death, that
Yeah.
they kind
Yes.
of went, sort of harking back to that, unseamed him from the names
I
of
would
the
agree.
chaps,
Yeah.
that it's, whatever they do, it's got that underpinning of violence, because that is the nature of Macbeth himself.
I wonder, yeah, then that's an interesting thing to talk about in terms of how, yeah, he's this violent man, but then when we think about Lady Macbeth and her perception of him, she's come up with this plan, this violent plan of murdering Duncan, stabbing him. But the first thing she says about Macbeth is that he's too full of the milk of human kindness. So she does. Her first thoughts maybe of him are not to go to violence in terms of him grasping it. She literally says he's too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So it's maybe upon discussion then perhaps that they decide that.
So I'm just going to check something, because you've just brought to my mind something that actually I don't think she says that to stab him.
I don't believe she does.
True,
No,
actually,
she doesn't.
yeah.
She says in Act 1, Scene 7, what cannot you and I perform on the unguarded Duncan?
They are smothering.
Yeah.
That's my
Could-
thought.
yeah.
And then it's actually Macbeth who comes up with the idea of smearing with blood from the daggers.
Yes,
Can,
indeed.
can we just sort of seize on that idea that you were talking about Lady Macbeth's fault that he did it? Because that does come up quite a lot,
Yeah.
doesn't it? And I feel like we need to sort of spend a bit more time on that one, because I think if you put the play in context for a minute, which hopefully Educast will allow me to do for a hot minute.
Oh no.
So if you put the play in context for a minute, you've got to think about the sort of time period. It was the early modern era. We think of the word modern as being now, but the modern era began in around the 1500s. So, the world was changing. We had the printing press, voyages to America, and society and culture were changing very rapidly as well. And there was this kind of sense in British society that a woman's job was to sort of provide abject confirmation to every act her husband wanted to perform. It was a woman's job to confirm everything her husband wanted to perform. And with this confirmation, their husbands could go on and continue these unremitting acts of self-interest that they wanted to do. And there are some academics that sort of believe that Shakespeare was trying to use her to parody the modern wife. He was trying to use her as a parody figure, of the modern wife. I'm not saying that's necessarily how Shakespeare intended it, but that's how a lot of academics read it. That she was actually, rather than being, a typical queen from the 1000s when the play is set, actually she was a parody of a modern wife, or Shakespeare's interpretation of it.
I mean, it's quite interesting because it brings me back. One of my favourite quotes is when she tells him, "Infirm of purpose."
Yeah.
You're useless, and it just makes me think of. I'm not going to mention my mum and dad. Any sort of wife, whose husband or whoever it is has done the washing up and he's done a really bad job of it, and she's like, "Are you useless? Or are you stupid? You haven't done it the way you should have done it." And then she takes control over it. So there is quite a sort of more modern sense to it in that way for me.
I think there's also a sense in the play that this is not the first time they've discussed killing the king. That there is a sense that even before the play starts, that they have discussed Scotland is clearly a chaotic place. King Duncan does not have control. MacDonald has rebelled. Thane of Cawdor is a traitor. The Norwegians are invading. This is a chaotic place. And there's clearly been some discussion about whether Duncan is fit to rule and whether Macbeth would be fit to rule. And if you look at Macbeth at the beginning, he is what you would think of as the ideal king. He's strong, he's a war hero, he fights for his country. So
He's
I
loyal.
think, yeah, he's loyal. So there's this clear idea that the witches have not introduced this idea of him being king. Lady Macbeth has not persuaded him. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have clearly already had a discussion about who would be suited to rule Scotland. And I think Duncan is clearly not suited. And I think that to suggest that she's pushed this idea upon him just ignores some of the clear evidence in the text. I want to go back to what Jordan says about the role of a wife, because in that time, in the 10th century when this play is set, it would be often that a queen would give her king permission to do things that were not masculine. So often if a king wanted to pardon a prisoner, his wife would have to plead for that prisoner's life. Now this wouldn't be the queen's thought, it'd be the king, but he would have to have his wife ask so that he would have permission to do something merciful. So maybe Shakespeare is also subverting that idea of a wife giving a man permission to do something out of his character in the way that making Macbeth or giving Macbeth permission to be disloyal.
Just reminds me of an episode of Blackadder, the second one.
I feel like everything reminds me so much of an episode of Blackadder.
Just lives inside an episode.
That
of
or Monty
Blackadder.
Python, one of the two.
I think she's such a... I don't know whether nuanced is the right word for her in terms of a character, because I think we do feel that intense sense of sympathy for her at key moments of the play, and I think that really starts pretty much
Such as?
immediately following, well, not immediately following the murder, but sort of immediately once they've taken the throne, you know. It's almost like she's completely pushed aside from
So
that point
one
forwards.
thing that I always think about is the bit where she faints. So I always wonder with this, because often it's played as she's faking a faint to try and detract attention from Macbeth, who's whittering on in very flowery language about the death of Duncan, you know, his golden blood, his silver skin, all of that. So she's trying to deflect attention before he reveals his guilt. But I often wonder, is that actually her fainting because she truly realises the brutal potential of her husband? She, like Mark said, she, you know, too full of the milk of human kindness. She has this view of him as a very kind and gentle man. He kills Duncan because he feels he has to become king. And yet, the murder of the grooms was not planned. It was a brutal murder, killed them with his sword. Is that actually Lady Macbeth's first sign that she's realised what she's unleashed by pushing Macbeth into this
like a genuine
violent...
Yeah, I think
to
it's
what he's done.
because we read this play with this assumption that Lady Macbeth is sort of inherently and completely malicious from the beginning. We just assume that the fainting scene is a deflection from what's happening, but actually there's nothing really in the scene to indicate that she is pretending to
It literally
faint.
just says help me hence so, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't actually say, does it even say she faints in the stage directions?
Let me
It says
have a
look to the lady.
Yeah, it says look to the lady.
Yeah.
And then she's carried out.
Yeah, and
So-
actually, you know, there is nothing in there to suggest that she does faint. To faint on purpose.
Yeah, it's
So
all interpretation, isn't it, really?
we often go into it with our own preconceptions, don't we? You know,
Of her being manipulative.
of her being
Yeah, yeah.
manipulative.
I wanted to pick out, we talked about it earlier, a little parallel that I've sort of started to weave into lessons the more that we've taught Macbeth, and there's this idea that when in Act 2, Scene 2, once Macbeth has come back from committing the murders, and when he refuses to go back into the room to see, he doesn't want to look on what he's done, look on it again, I dare not. She tells him that 'tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil, sort of like mocking him for being quite childish. And then as we go through that entire character arc of Lady Macbeth, by the time we see her for the very last time, she's reduced down into this pitiful childlike figure, and that's even reflected in the language that she uses in that the Thane of Fife had a wife, that sort of sing-song nursery rhyme kind of quality. And it's like it's such an interesting journey that she goes on, I think, from that moment, from planning the murder, from having those ambitions for her husband, to taking charge immediately following the murder, mocking him for acting like a child, or putting on a front saying, you know, you're just being childish and I can do it, to then get to that point at the end where she's just completely broken.
I'm going to jump in there because
Go on, jump
sorry,
in.
I'm going
I'll jump in after.
Jump
Go
in
on,
after
you jump in first.
because mine segues quite nicely. One of my favourite quotes from Macbeth is, "Who would have thought the old man to have so much blood in him?"
Yeah.
And I think that very much links this idea of perhaps Lady Macbeth did not realise what she was putting in place, because she didn't see the murder, but she went back in and saw the aftermath. So that quote can be kind of interpreted in a few different ways, is that maybe she just feels guilt for the murder. But I think actually it's perhaps that she fully realises the brutality of a murder. She's never been on a battlefield. She's never seen her husband unseam him from the naves with chaps with smoked to bloody execution. She doesn't know that. She's probably lived a fairly sheltered life in terms of that. So perhaps she didn't realise what the murder of someone she was fairly close with would look like. Also, I think as well it links that idea of her setting in path a series of events that perhaps this, who would have thought, had so much blood in it, is a metaphor for all the later murders that came.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the death of Duncan is not truly the cause of her guilt, but like Mark said, the Thane of Fife had a wife. It's the subsequent murders that come after it, the murder of Banquo, the murder of Macduff's family.
I'd never really thought about that, the idea of who would have thought the old man to sort of a metaphor for the rest of the murders in the play. That makes a lot of sense.
And when you think about it, like the whole Banquo's murder and things like that, you know, she was sheltered from that plan. You know, I often think she tries to convince Macbeth that there's nothing to be worried about with Banquo when he's saying we've scotched the snake, not killed it, and all that sort of stuff. She's like, well, is it in nature's copy? Nature's copy's not eternal, or something like that. Like this idea of, you know, it's not something that's going to last forever. We don't have to worry about it just now. But then still, further down the line, there's more murders that are carried out, and this, like you said, like this shock that comes from that. And what have I unleashed? What have I done? What did I do by pushing this man to commit the first murder? I didn't realise that the sea of blood that was going to follow it. It's a really interesting idea.
And I actually hesitate with this idea that Lady Macbeth does have a big old character arc, because actually, the way I read it, at the beginning of the play, when she receives Macbeth's letter for the first time, her soliloquies there are, they're brutal, they're relentless, they are savage. But then after that, she's, most of her sort of future appearances, she's either very repressed, she's panicked, or she's just going plain mad. And, those soliloquies, for me, just represent sort of rage and excess and repression pouring out of her in that scene, but they don't represent necessarily who she is as a person. The irony is that, all of that rage and excess, what do they end up doing? They just advance patrilineage. Well, whoop-de-doo, good for her. That's probably not what she wanted, was it?
Well, and even then she can't take part of it, because I think we're also forgetting that, Lady Macbeth is a woman who's lost a child. How recent that is, it's not clear. But she's definitely a woman who's lost a child. She's definitely someone who potentially is grieving. And trying to find perhaps purpose in life. So I think that's also something to take into account. Going back to what you said about her initial speech, even in that speech when she's being incredibly violent, she still talks about, let not the eye wink at the hand. I can't remember the exact quote, but she wants the dunnest smoke of hell to cover her over. She still does not want to face up to what she is planning to do. It's still all about, she wants to become evil to do it, not that she already is evil.
Let not my keen knife see the wound it makes.
That's the one.
There's a naivety to her, isn't there? Like, she wants to do the deed, and I think Macbeth understands perhaps why he's so reluctant to do it. He understands that they're not gonna get it easily. They're not, it's not going to come easily. Banquo will suspect. They might have to go on a killing spree. They're going to have to be more violent to keep the throne. And I think perhaps she doesn't realise that. It's just going to be one thing. I can cope with that. I don't have to think about it, and then off we trot, and king and queen, happy times.
I think with the asking to be evil, the whole Act 1 Scene 5, unsex me here and all that. I often think there's a little bit of a performative element to it as well, in that we see her in this scene ask for the spirits to come into her life and remove these feminine qualities, replace her with the dominant masculine qualities such as cruelty, and then 2 scenes later she sort of performatively does that in front of our very eyes to Macbeth. She references this feminine quality of breastfeeding and talking about how I know what it's like to do that, and then contrasts it immediately, thinking I'm going to remove these feminine qualities and replace them with the violent masculine qualities by dashing its brains out. There's almost it almost feels a little bit performative.
It's almost like she's playing dress up, isn't she? She's trying on someone else's costume and she likes to feel of it for a moment.
I've got to feel evil now. I've got to do this evil thing.
But really it doesn't quite fit on her.
Whether she actually would dash her baby's brains out remains to be seen. Probably not.
No, and I think there's a sense as well that she genuinely thinks Macbeth deserves to be king. She genuinely thinks that is the right thing to do. I don't think it's as year 10s and 11s have said to me before, she's not a gold digger. She's not trying to do it for herself. Not once in the play does she mention being queen. That's never that. It's always about give thee the crown withal, have thee, you'll be so much more than man. It's always about him reaching his potential. Now, potentially that could be because a woman in her position would only ever achieve power through her husband. But I also think it's that from the beginning of the play, we know that their love and connection is genuine. And I think that she does believe that he deserves to be king, going back to what I said before about Scotland being in chaos. She thinks he'd be the right person for the job.
It's almost as if there's like a sense of frustration with Duncan in that idea that he had the power to name the next rightful king. We already know that he's not the best judge of character because one of his thanes betrayed him, and then he names his son, who we know nothing about.
Well, we know his son's not been at war.
Well, the only thing we actually know about his son in the war is that he was nearly captured.
Rescued,
he was rescued by the sergeant.
Yeah.
And it almost then feels like Lady Macbeth and Macbeth could feel that frustration with, well, look, you've got this quite clearly kingly man who could do so much good for the country, and yet you've just lumped it onto your eldest son. We need to do what needs to be done for the best of the country.
He's
an
getting his
interesting
hands
thought,
dirty, isn't he? He's the one that's taking all the risks, and Malcolm's just sort of
gets it, doesn't he?
With his sort of little don't make me dirty kind of.
Yeah.
I'm going to be king, but I don't actually want to do anything.
I'm actually reasonably certain. History teachers may correct me here, but I'm reasonably certain Malcolm killed Macbeth in real life.
I think it was, because I'm sure Banquo in real life was in it with Macbeth,
Most
wasn't
of them
it?
were.
They were co-conspirators, I believe.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, like the history goes, Duncan, Macbeth,
Yeah.
Malcolm.
I believe Duncan's army killed. I believe Macbeth's army killed Duncan in battle in real life, and Macbeth reigned peacefully for about 20 years, and then he was killed by one of Duncan's descendants, I think. But
probably wouldn't make as good a play though, would it?
it's not very exciting. Like 20 years of peaceful reign.
It's a really good time for 20 years.
Yeah.
Excellent crop yields. Taxes collected on time.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite cartoons I've ever seen, which is where Macbeth meets the three witches, and they prophesise that crop rotation will bring in bigger yields. And he goes, what about me? And they say, oh, we're moving away from the great man view of history and going to a more holistic view.
Oh, I love that. That's
Please
real.
cut that out. That's such a boring anecdote.
No, I love it.
As
Keep
we
it
often
in.
say, you have to own every boring thing you say on this podcast.
Yay, the little people. We always like to champion
Our
the little
listener relies
people.
on it.
It's like sending Eva Smith back in time, isn't it? I wonder what her crop rotation would look like.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
What did that mean?
It's been a long week.
It would probably be quite barren because Mr. Berlin would take it all away from her, wouldn't
that's
it?
true, that's true.
Anyway, right, I'm mixing up my texts now. Right, so any particular quotes that we've talked about a few, but any that you think are really sort of useful for year 11, year 10 to remember in terms of Lady Macbeth?
I feel like a year 11 that's just walked into an exam, and now that you've asked me that question directly,
Well, I'm just going to go back
oh
to.
my God.
So who would have known the old man? Who would have thought the old man to have so much blood on him?
Yes.
Just remember that. It's such a good quote for summing up her reaction.
You've just reminded me there of that parallel with had he not looked like my father as he slept, I had done it. That sort of like that, and that's before she's even gone back in and seen the murder. Like, she's, I would have done it, but he looked like my dad. Like that sort of always reminds me of like a year 9 boy bragging about what he could do, but just decides that I was too cool for it. Like, I'm not gonna do that.
I also think there's two parallel quotes which are also quite useful in terms of the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Is Macbeth at the beginning of the play calls her my dearest partner of greatness, which suggests a certain amount of respect, equality, that the power they gain will be together. And then later, when he's hiding the fact that he's planning to murder Banquo, he says, be innocent in the knowledge, my dearest Chuck.
Yeah.
And we have that idea. We've still got that dearest in there showing affection, but Chuck is a very infantilizing, patronising way of put it. He no longer sees her as an equal. He no longer sees her as a co-conspirator. And I think if we're tracking the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, that's a really clear way that it changes from before the murder of Duncan to after.
And that links to the quote I was going to give, actually. It's this idea that she kind of loses grip on Macbeth this kind of, you know, the old parable of the scorpion and the frog, and the scorpion stings the frog and the frog stays... Sorry, everyone's looking at their watch. Well, you're not enjoying my parable about the scorpion and the frog. I'm going to finish anyway.
You were telling it so well.
Yes,
as well. There's a frog and a scorpion.
So
the frog said something, the scorpion said something.
I'm going to condense the parable, but there's a scorpion and a frog. They make friends. The scorpion stings the frog, and the frog says, "Why'd you sting me?" And the scorpion says, "Well, you knew I was a scorpion." And it's that kind of thing, isn't it? She knows Macbeth's a scorpion, you know, and
But
she's
I'm
surprised when he stings her.
Or
Rather, she knows he's a man, and she knows he's a man of a certain stature, and she knows that that there'll be a level of understanding of what he's capable of. And
See, I'm not so sure there is.
If I have to mark some
can I
mock papers that talk about scorpions and frogs,
no, his mind's full
I'm
of
blaming
scorpions.
you.
His mind's full of scorpions. Just throwing it out there. Anyway, can I just give my quote now, because it does segue very nicely from that one. At the end of a play, he finds out that Lady Macbeth is dead, and he dismisses her by saying she should have died hereafter. You know, sort of, she should have died hereafter. In other words, kind of meaning, you know, oh, I'm surprised she wasn't already dead. You know, and it's.
I just thought it meant not a good time.
Oh, how do you
Well,
interpret it?
so should and would were interchangeable in those days. So she would have died anyway, or she should have died at another time. It's very ambiguous. I always use that in that way.
I understand that Macbeth is he's desolate at this point. He's accepted his fate. He's resigned to death, but it's just so kind of devoid of outward emotion. It's so sort of dismissive, and maybe he's saving face, but it's just such a cold final line to speak about you know, his partner in greatness, I suppose. And
It's a
for me,
weird
it's
one,
quite...
that, though, because I think it depends on your interpretation. It really does, and it depends on the performance. Because I sometimes read that as she should have died hereafter. It wasn't her time, and then he goes on this big flowery speech about how life's now meaningless. A poor player who shuts and frets his hour upon the stage and all that. And it's almost as if the light out brief candle has been snuffed out.
So
I think you can look at it in different ways.
How would you interpret that line?
I sort of see it as this idea of an intense nihilism, now that everything's pointless, but it's triggered by that news of his wife's death, and I think you can definitely interpret it in multiple ways. I think what the best thing to do a lot of the times is to watch lots of different versions, because the Joseph Milson version, in the Globe version that we show to the students, there's a single tear running down his face. It's an intensely emotional scene when he hears his wife's died. But then there's other ones where it is, like you've been saying, it's completely devoid of emotion and dismissive attitude.
And again, for people listening and thinking, well, that's great, but how do I use that in an exam? Just remember that sort of people who get the highest grades are the ones who are willing to explore
alternative interpretations.
Exactly, in the way we're doing right now. So, you know, don't be put off by that, because you know, being able to explore multiple valid interpretations is a real skill to have.
You should always be saying perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps it means this, or as my year 11 seem to have picked up, perchance. Like, please stop saying perchance. You're not from the 19th century. Please stop saying perchance it means this. But no, perhaps it means this, but perhaps it means something else. You know, explore those alternative interpretations to get to the top band, definitely.
So if we were going to think of an alternative ending for Lady Macbeth, I mean, if she had lived, I'm assuming she'd be executed along with, would have been Macbeth. Would that have been a more fitting end to her? Why do you
I would posit the question that I think that would maybe be unfair in terms of an execution, perhaps because she didn't actually commit any murders.
No, she didn't. Even though she gets, you know, her epitaph at the end of fiend-like queen, perhaps is more harsh than Macbeth, who gets dead butcher. So dead butcher would suggest a mindless killing, whereas fiend-like again goes back to the idea that she is the one. Yeah. Even though she committed no murder, she was involved in only one of Macbeth's many atrocities. Yet she is the one who is blamed by Malcolm and by some students for being the cause of everything that happens.
And it suggests she was a mastermind and he was simply following orders, and that is a really sort of harsh way of looking at a character, isn't it?
There's that way of reading it, isn't it? That she's the fourth witch.
Oh, I hate
it.
I hate it.
That aforementioned novel is, you know, the Lady Macbeth novel. That's where it goes. It goes down the thing of her being a witch, and it's.
I mean, it's a deliciously simple idea, but it's just I just don't think that was ever Shakespeare's intention.
Yeah, no.
It fits annoyingly too nicely with like the idea of misogyny. You know, the woman's to blame for the man's action. She's to blame, and also bringing in this idea of witches, women are
She's
all
a witch.
Yeah, she's a
witch.
witch. Burn the witch kind of.
Yeah.
View, which I think is just too simplistic.
The fact is that the first time Macbeth has met the witches on the heath, long before we see Lady Macbeth, he's already made up his mind. You know, just study his speech in that scene.
Yeah.
He's already, you know, think about Banquo's caution and Banquo's suspicion, and think about Macbeth. You know, he says it's wrapped with all.
Yeah.
You know, stay you imperfect speakers.
Yeah.
He's made up his mind before he even sees her.
Yeah.
I like to think that had she lived, she would have been able to be just a spinster in a tower. Lock her up in the tower, leave her up there.
I mean, that
be
doesn't
fine.
sound much better.
No.
It's better than execution, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think
That's it.
make her Queen of Alba. You know.
Yeah. See, my alternative theory is that for the whole play, Lady Macbeth should have been queen. She's the one who comes up with the plan.
Yeah.
She's the one who's got the ideas. She's the one who pushes. You know, Shakespeare spent most of his life under the rule of a queen, so maybe he didn't like the fact that they now had a king and he wanted to go back to that feminine power.
Oh, he was a big fan of King James, though, wasn't he?
Oh, only because he gave him the money.
Because he gave him the money. Yeah.
I
the
think
rest.
she should have lived in the woods.
Did I just say that? Oh my god.
Is that something we need to...
That's going to need to just move. Let's skip over that and let's just carry on to the
Well-
end of the podcast.
I think that she should have lived in the woods with a cat.
Really?
In a house with chicken legs.
Yeah.
And
House
just
with
have
chicken legs.
That would have been
lived
great.
Maybe she should have gone and joined the witches. They seem to be living their best life, chilling out on
they're
the
having a
heath,
great time,
giving
aren't they?
prophecies.
I would want to be. If I could be anyone in Macbeth, I would be a witch.
Yeah,
I'd be the old
they're
man.
great.
Would you? You'd be
I'd be the old man who comes on, talks about horses eating, and then just leaves.
Random old man.
Random. Don't even get in. Just wander on. Horses are eating each other.
Yeah. There you go, job done.
Yeah.
I think Miss Owens would be the porter, just kind of wandering in, giving a really
Yeah.
cryptic speech and dancing around and then disappearing.
I'd like to be young Seward.
Young
so I could
Seward,
come on,
of course.
Be slain and then I die like a man. That's it. That's all.
Although Seward don't really care.
It's just like
Talk about dismissive of death.
like a man he died.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Was he fighting at the time? Yeah, all right then.
Yeah.
That's okay then.
Although
That's all
in
right.
real life, Seward was instrumental in the downfall of
He
Macbeth.
certainly was. Yeah. Was it Earl of Northumberland, wasn't he?
I can't remember the details. I
think
once
he's
read
the
it and then never read it again.
Good job we don't need to use context, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good job. Yeah.
Right, okay, should we bring this to a close then? Is
Yeah.
there anything else that... well, no, thank
Oh,
you.
I
No.
think just one thing we need to bring up, which Mr. Bruff brought up earlier. Lady Macbeth at no point in her life would have cooked and cleaned. She was a lady. She had servants to do that.
Yes.
That's my
Not
final
scrubbing the
message.
steps.
She's not scrubbing the
In
steps.
an apron with her hair tied up
Curlers in.
with a curlers in.
I
What
mean,
we got-
she'd been living a great life then, wouldn't she? She wouldn't have to do
She would have a
anything.
great life.
Yeah,
Husband's
yeah.
belly there, always at war.
Yeah.
Chasing Macbeth around with a slipper.
Sounds all right to me, yeah.
What we're going to do next? What's our next subject? Do we know?
I don't know actually. I think we shall have a thinky about that, or ask Year 11 what they want.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
suggestions? Yeah,
Yeah.
do ask.
Brilliant.
But right, thank you very much to those people who've taken part again. I think we start as we mean to go on, how we always have, and have a lovely weekend.
Bye.